one went into his big studio where a large number of his sculptures are placed. And their descriptions of the last days of his life where he didn't climb the stairs anymore. And he lay on a small bed here in his studio, and he was found dead, and above him he had the globe, the earth, on the string. And so he had spent the last days of his life meditating on the earth and this pure shape. His sculpture is about pure shape. So Parinirvana is the great Buddhist tradition where it's not like Christ who was nailed to the cross and died in suffering. Parinirvana with the Buddha is just the withdrawal of life force and in fact of the form itself, of kind of disappearing. So it deals really with an energetic field of both presence and absence, where the door itself becomes this radiant form, which appears very often in my work, which is this shape, which is called a lingam, which is the Hindu symbol of creativity on the highest level. It's the combination of the masculine phallus and the feminine egg. So it's this male-female principle which is transcendent. So each work inevitably is a quotation of other works that I've done and thoughts that slowly evolve. So in time, a visual vocabulary evolves. I travel extensively, so this is Paris, this is Kyoto, and this drawing in the path of the cyclone is a work out of a series which I've done on a small island in the Seychelles. A friend of mine, Russell Friedman, bought this island called North Island, and when he bought it, he invited me to come to the island, and for 4 years we'd get dropped off by a fast boat or helicopter onto this uninhabited island, which is one of the most extraordinary experiences in my life, to be just within the natural environment. These huge granitic outcrops, wonderful plants, and so I've gone back over the years many times, and each time I go I cut a palm leaf. Sometimes they're these huge cocoa leaves which are literally as wide as from this wall to here, and they would almost, well, with their stem, they would touch the top of the tent. They're huge. So I quite often cut one and I put it in the space that I'm living in, and that has become a series of drawings over the years, and they're called Elegies to the Forest. And there are a number of drawings which talk about the growth force, the energy within the plant world, which for me is one of the great models of engineering in the first place. When one looks at the structure of these leaves, they fold up in the most spectacular fashion and then open out into these huge structures which are able to deal with wind. In fact, when I was studying at Berkeley, I had a friend at Stanford who was a mathematician, and he spent all the time I was with him folding paper, and I eventually said, well, what are you doing? It looked like origami. And he said, well, he was trying to take a sheet of paper and try and fold it as small as possible and in a manner that it could unfurl very easily. And he was doing this for NASA, so that they could send these structures into deep space and they could deploy as these extensions of telescopes. So the folding principles are so interesting, and if one does look at nature, there's a lot to learn. What I've also always loved about the leaves is that they are able to make food from light. So they live very lightly on the planet, we are all part of this very aggressive food chain of one thing eating another, and it really, in the end, is, I find it deeply problematic, you know, but at the same time it is this order. But when I see us at the top of the order and now destroying forests, destroying animals, one ecosystem after another. I was on an expedition last year in Micronesia, down the Wallace Line, actually just near the Philippines. And we dived twice a day for a month and monitoring coral fish. And in that time we saw 3 sharks. That's all. I mean, the sharks have been absolutely decimated. We don't know what is happening under the oceans, but in a way we really are custodians of the planet. And so if one looks at great Japanese art, if one looks at even the Western tradition of looking at nature, it is a deep sense of connectedness and understanding of it, which does come through art. Biology has been problematic in some ways in that we cut everything into pieces to try and understand it, and we lose the life force. We do understand it on a mental level, but the sense of connection very often goes. So it is, I suppose it's trying to understand what it is to be in the presence of nature and to be attentive to it. That is also part of my practice, being attentive to nature or attentive to the universe or attentive to a rock or to a place. And so it's trying to find those quiet places in between that have lessons for one. But you need to be open to it, and I think that's what creativity does for us, be it if you're in business or whether you're an artist or whether you're a nurseryman. It is it's intelligent looking and shaping of the world around us. People very often, or a question that comes up very often is, well, why are there no people in your drawings or in your works? And sometimes it's a very difficult thing to answer, but a lot of my work is really about consciousness. It really is about how we perceive the world, and so it is being about being inside the body, inside the brain, inside the mind, looking outwards, rather than being physically manifest, which is very different to Joni Brenner's work, for instance. If we move across to Joni Brenner, Joni Brenner is a portrait painter, but there is, if you think of what portrait painters normally do, they flatter people, people want high status images above their mantelpiece, they commission artists to make a likeness, and Brenner is very interested in likeness, but she is not interested in vanity. So there's no vanity in these works. They are, or her practice is involved doing portraits maybe of 4 people in her body of work. And so they are about a direct connection with her sitter. And for a portrait painter to make images of skulls is really to look at the very scaffolding of our faces. So it is the underlying structure which inevitably leads to the shape or the physiognomy of each of us. So Joni has a practice where she very often does a painting a day, a watercolor. So she does a work, she does another one and another. She's working sometimes from the famous Taung skull, one of the very earliest paleontological skulls found in the found up in the Taul. And then she worked with specimens which come from the cradle of mankind. Then she also worked with human skulls, and they are a meditation really on both life and on death, of the kind of transient. And there are times are very ethereal, and at other times they're very, very structured. But for me, the fascinating thing about her practice is that in this repetition, she will paint a skull or a face again and again, but not one of them is ever the same. So it's a bit like playing a Beethoven sonata that has been played since he wrote it to this moment. It has been interpreted and reinterpreted depending on the conductor, on the musician. So it mutates constantly, and it talks as much about the object as it does about the maker. And so these are a very close reflection of a state of being. So when one has a scientific experiment, one does very often just try and cut down the variables. So the variables here are absolutely pared down to the skull or persistence. And the works are as much about the person as they are about the process. And you all know that there are photographs that have been taken of you that don't look like you at all. And think, well, I don't look like that. And we're caught in those moments where we say, oh, that's a quintessential image of somebody. And what is it? We expect a quintessential image very often from the portrait painter. But in Brenner, she is not just interested in that quintessential image. She battles with that image constantly until she finds it. And so it's not like a quick caricature. I mean, cartoonists are able to capture the salient features and reproduce Zuma every time or whoever it is because of those salient features. So she's not interested in the superficial likenesses. She's interested in this relationship between herself, the viewer, and the process of making. And I think it's very evident in the way that you feel it's a dialogue, it's an engagement with the image. It's not working from a photograph. I mean, most people, when they think of portraiture, many portrait painters, of course, take lots of photographs and they kind of reconstruct the likeness. It couldn't be further from the truth here. So it is a document about what it is to be human, not what it is to be an image. And she has the capacity to use the paint in a way that here kind of wrinkles, almost like a person getting old. The painting gets old, and it shows itself. It sits on this beautiful stone block. And so you have this kind of transient image on something that is very permanent. There's permanence and impermanence. And then the subtlety of a work like this, even the way it's framed, talks about the tonalities of black. There's not one black here. I mean, there are a whole series of blacks, and you're working with light and dark, and it's a brooding work. I mean, it's a fantastic touch of the hair, just on the top, made by the brush mark, but it so is the hair. I mean, it's a fantastic little detail. And then, the matterness of this piece of slate in relation to this buffed shininess of the granite. So the background seems to leap in front of you in a kind of glamorous way, and the figure seems to move into this void-like quality. And so at times they're very visceral. I mean, these reds feel as though they're vibrant, but they also understand the fragileness, the fleshiness of us. You know, so are they vibrant images? Are they violent images? You know, so the reading alters constantly when one starts to interrogate the work. So it's like poetry. When you start to engage the work, not just as something pretty, but as an investigation, it starts to yield a kind of resonance to it. And I think she's one of the most serious painters in our country, with a kind of dedicatedness, there's an intelligence, there is a focus in her work over the last few years, now a few decades, where people see a star, and that's Brenda. It's never the same Brenda. And we see this practice, you know, with some of the great British painters like Lucian Freud, who those paintings are ferocious because it's like a constant sitting with that, with his models, and he paints, he repaints, on top of each other until that image absolutely sinks. And so it's as though it's imbued by the process. It's not creating the surface look. And I think I really look forward to a time seeing how the resonance builds in her work. She's a slow burner. But I'm happy if there's some questions, if there are things that you would like me to talk a bit more about, would be happy to. I love trick questions.
We can perhaps loosen up around chat directly to Karel. There's a huge amount of information, as I said before, on the gallery website. And you can see both Joni's and Karel's past exhibitions over the years, installation shots, writing, photographs, the museum exhibitions, a lot of information to spend time. But here's the one.
Thank you.